Morning, good afternoon. Good morning. Can you all hear me fine? What happened there now? Live, yes, yes, we hear you. Okay, that's good. Perfect. Good morning. Welcome you all, um, wherever you are, whether it's good morning or still already good afternoon to you. I'm happy to be here and I have a good conversation and answer questions around the GM crops. Let me start off introducing myself. I am Anil Kumar Gowda. I work at Bayer Crop Science as Global Regulatory Manager. Let me tell you a little bit about how I came to work for Bayer. I grew up in a farming family in India. In fact, I had to work on our farm before and after school. This experience gave me an opportunity to see how difficult it was to produce the crops, and also taught me about how bad insects or diseases or even weeds can be in producing quality products that we could use in our family. At the same time, we also reared insects at home that actually paid my education. This is what we call as a sericulture, which is rearing silkworms that paid my education. So without this money, I would not have been here today to tell you about my story. So as a growing boy, I got to see both good and bad sides of insects. That helped me narrow down my options for my education. So I ended up in bachelor's degree in agriculture. Subsequently, went on to get a master's and a PhD both in entomology as well. But after finishing my both bachelor's and master's in India, I worked at Monsanto at that time in Bangalore. And that's where I got to hear about the safe and sustainable products this company was developing for farmers around the world. And most importantly, I fell in love with the impact of these products that had on the farming community and also on environment. So I thought if I get an advanced degree, it will help me to play a bigger role in developing these kinds of products. So I quit my job at Monsanto Bangalore, came to US, went to Auburn University, Alabama, got my PhD in entomology, and subsequently joined Monsanto here in the US back in 2008. Since that time, I have been working in our R&D program in the discovery and development of GM crops. A little bit more detail here is I spent 9 years in our insect control program. This is where we think about what sort of insects are problematic, not just today, even for the foreseeable future in US, Australia, India, or globally. And we set up our testing programs where we test all of these insects and generate the knowledge and information necessary to discover the products. And later, once we discover these products, we will test them again in the field and subsequently move them through the pipeline for the commercialization. In fact, I can answer more questions when people have any to know about more in depth about these things. But in the last 3 years, I have been leading our efforts in the regulatory organization, trying to get the products approved by demonstrating their safety and utility to farmers. So here I am. That's my background, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Okay. Well, I don't see any questions popping up yet. So let me take a minute and talk about five questions that always come up whenever I engage in these topics, especially when I share my background as to and my insect control expertise. People always ask me these questions. First one, are the BT crops or the GM crops safe? Okay, so to answer this one, I'll just basically say BT crops are safe, no doubt about them. But let me tell you why I think that way. One, the BT in this case stands for Bacillus thuringiensis, the bacteria that was discovered in early 1900s, 1901 actually to be correct, in Japan, and subsequently was identified as Bacillus thuringiensis in Germany. And the Thuringia is actually the place where this organism was discovered, and that's why it's called as Bacillus thuringiensis. And this bacteria produces the protein, which has been used in agriculture since 1960s. Only recently, we started putting the sequence of information that translates into a protein, eventually giving the beneficial trait of this protein to the organism that's being expressed. Basically, in this case, if you are expressing in a corn plant or a soybean plant, by expressing this protein, you are making the plant protect itself from a only set of insects on which this protein is efficacious. So most of the cases, the products we have on the market today are efficacious against only a target group of insects. If you look at this soybean, for example, there are caterpillars or what we call as lepidopterans that feed on the leaves. So these are the organisms that are being controlled by this Bt protein, whereas the stink bug that feed on the same plant does not get affected by this protein. So it is Bt proteins are extremely specific and they are efficacious against only the target insects on which we deploy these products for. Okay. Well, I see a question. Let me try and answer that one, and then in the meantime, I can go through my list here. So the question here is, can you explain what, by definition, is a pesticide? So that's a good question. Let's break up the word pesticide, pest and side. Okay, pest is anything that comes in your way of producing a successful crop. It can be a weed, or it can be a insect or disease. Any of these are actually stopping the farmers from producing a successful crop. It's referred as pest. Indeed, you can even argue a soybean plant in a corn field can also be a pest. And the other way around is also true too. Now let's talk about side. Side is something that refers to kill. So you're basically using any mechanism to kill these live organisms. It could be a plant, disease, or insect. So pesticide is something you can use, predominantly it's a chemical you can use to kill these pests. Okay, I see. I don't see any other questions, so I'll go through my other question in my list here. So you're producing these BT crops. Do they create superbugs? Is the another question that comes up frequently. So let's talk about what are superbugs. So before I define that one, maybe some of you already heard about multiple drug-resistant bacteria, right? So what it means is if you get sick, say for example, you got a fever, you go to a doctor and he prescribes an antibiotic. It's called ciprofloxacin. So when you take the ciprofloxacin, you probably kill 90% of those bacteria, or even 99% of bacteria living in your body, and only 1 or 2% will survive. So that the antibiotic you took did not create that survivorship or two bacteria to survive in your system, but it only killed the ones that are susceptible to this drug. Basically, what happens over time, so the two bacteria that survive this treatment can continue to multiply in your body and still cause a disease for you, right? And that's the reason when you go to a doctor again after a week or so with the course of ciprofloxacin, if you are not controlled with the fever, then he will say, okay, go this time, take amoxicillin, right? It's a different kind of the antibiotic he will prescribe to you. So you can kill the bacteria that are resistant to ciprofloxacin, but by using amoxicillin, you can kill them. So basically, the same exact thing works out in the nature here for the superbugs too. In this case, when you have a BT crop that's growing in an environment, and if 90% of the insects are susceptible of a target species, you control all of them, whereas the surviving insects will continue to multiply in the cropping system over a period of time. That their population will increase, and they'll after a certain period of time, they can continue to damage even the BT crops that are successful in the previous years of cultivation. So to overcome this, what we do at our company or even any other biotech company, for example, is we try to deploy multiple BT proteins or multiple mechanisms of action against these controls, against these insects to control them effectively and for a longer period of time. So going back to my antibiotic example, now think about using both amoxicillin and the ciprofloxacin at the same time. The chances of having a bacteria that is resistant to both of these antibiotic chemicals is very, very low. In the same way, when we do this research on the insects, what we found, depending on the insect species, depending on the protein, the chances of having a resistant insect to 2 proteins or even 3 BT proteins at a time is 1 in a million, if not 1 in a billion. So back to my original point, does the BT crops create the superbugs? No, they do not, but they do select for the insects that are already resistant in the environment. So the higher the efficacy of your product, longer the durability of this product in the marketplace. Okay, let me see if there are other questions coming up here. Oh, okay. I did not scroll up. My apology. What would happen if farmers do not use any pesticides? Wow, that's a great question. Let me see. Typically, even with pesticide introduction or introduction into the environment by the farmer, you still lose a lot of crop you're trying to produce. And indeed, according to some estimates, you lose almost 1/3 of the crop if you do not bring in any control measures. And it need not have to be pesticide all the time. You can think about rotating a crop from corn to soybean, for example, or the other way around. That's one. And two, adjust your planting time, right? So even use a resistant variety. So some of these techniques over a period of time will give you some level of control. But pesticides, it's an after effect. So you already produce, you're growing your crop and you notice that some insects are feeding or diseases are coming. So you have to intervene from stopping those insects or the pests robbing the yield that farmer is trying to produce. So you will probably lose anywhere between 30 to even, depending on the insect species, geography, you could lose even 80 or 90% of your product or the crop you're trying to produce. And that's the reason why farmer had to step in and use some control measures. Okay, I see another question here. How does your work contribute to sustainability? What a great question. So let me address two pieces on that one here is I was trying to explain my background in terms of trying to produce the crops in our farm. So what I was doing at that time to control these insects was basically putting a backpack sprayer on my back and then going and spraying the rice plants to control the brown plant hopper. That was the number one pest in the region where I come from. So as a growing boy and in an illiterate family, I had no understanding of what safety meant. So I wasn't using any personal protective equipments, either the gloves or the mask, nothing whatsoever. So you can imagine in a summer environment, walking in a rice field with a backspray sprayer on your back and spraying these crops within 2, 3 feet away from where you are, and how much insecticides you are being exposed to. That's one. Two, the safety of individuals, the farmers in this case. The second thing, some of the pesticides are not very targeted, meaning you want to control the bad insects that are feeding on your rice crop, but at the same time protect your the beneficial insects such as the dragonflies or even neuropterans, right? Those are the insects that feed on the bad insects that you want to protect in the environment. So if you are not careful on your choice of pesticides or the timing of application, you could be damaging those insects as well. So the BD crops, actually, or GM crops in this case, are extremely, as I tried explaining earlier, is very important. In terms of their safety. So by cultivating this, you are contributing to not having to intervene and spray a number of times that you need to spray these crops. So what it means is you you probably are driving less number of times into your farm. Let me take an example here. For a farmer to produce a soybean crop in a geography like Brazil, he has to spray at least 6 to 8 times in a season to control these insects. Almost sometimes on a weekly basis, you have to mount a tractor with these sprayers and drive around. So you are creating so much soil impaction contraction because of the driving the tractor, and two, the tractor is releasing a lot of greenhouse gases, and three, since if you're not careful about your choice of your pesticides, you're also impacting the beneficial insects in that ecosystem. So basically by growing these GM crops, you are contributing to the sustainability of the environment, and then also the increased yield and the income of the farmers as well. Okay, so here is a question from Benjamin. Hi, Benjamin. Have the BT strains been found that are efficacious against Asian fly in wheat? Uh, Asian fly is a dipteran. We do know from the literature that there are certain pesticide, the BT proteins that can kill the dipteran insects, but I'm blanking on exact example. Do I know a protein that kills the Asian fly? Maybe not. But I can also say that there are no BT wheat that are available. Genetically modified wheat crop that is available for cultivation at this time. Okay, so let me see. Thought I saw another question here. Yeah, keep the questions coming. So I'll see what happens if okay, did not use the pesticides. How does it contribute to the sustainability? Okay. What kind of regulations do the GMOs go through? Wow, wow, it's a great question. So there are many countries that have the working regulatory systems, and they have identified agencies. For example, in the US, there are three, right? There is a USDA that looks at if I cultivated this new GM crop in the United States, that does this impact any other crops that are grown nearby or vegetation? Basically, they are looking at, is it good for the environment? Okay. Then the second thing, the EPA, they will look at, if you are producing this BT crop, is it going to kill a non-target insects? Say you are trying to control a corn earworm or a fall armyworm on a corn plant, but at the same time, they want to make sure that you are not killing a honeybee, right, or a monarch butterfly trying to produce this. So that's what EPA looks at. And finally, FDA, they look at, is the product, the GM crop, is as nutritious as that of non-GM counterpart? That's the question that they're primarily asking. So basically, in the US alone, there are three different agencies asking questions in a three different way to make sure that the product that comes out into the market is safe for the environment, for the non-target organisms, and also humans and animals that consume these products. Similarly, there are other countries that also have, established agencies that they regulate these products, and that's how when the products are approved for cultivation or import and food and feed processing around the world, we know these products are safe. But this is the regulation part. But let me tell you about how long it takes to produce bring one of these products into the market. It could be anywhere between 12 to 15 years of research from the time we put something into the assay plate, trying to see whether this new compound I have in my hand can control the insect, and that to become a product in a GM crop, it takes around 12 to 15 years. And all along this period, companies like ours, the Bayer or Syngentas or BASF, so these are all looking into the safety of aspect of this product to make sure that one, it does not create allergic reactions in the humans or the animals, or it does not kill the mouse or chickens or pigs that eat this crop, right? So all along this period, there are a number of safety studies that are conducted to make sure that these products are very safe. Because last thing you want is spending 12 to 15 years of research time and 100 to 150 million dollars for a product, and someone to prove that your product is unsafe, and you lose not only the time and also the money you invested on this effort. Okay. Let's see. I see another question here that comes up. Can you speak to the quantity of pesticides that are applied by farmers? Many consumers think the farmers routinely douse, drench, soak crops in pesticides. Wow. Wow. I mean, so it's a great question again. So no, farmers are actually paying for these chemicals. There is no point in dosing their plants with these chemicals. So as an example, for an acre of plot on soybean or even on the corn that you want to control the pests, you probably are talking about using a soda can, like 32 ounce of the Pepsi can that you drink, a Coke, worth of the actual ingredient of that chemical mixed into around 500, 600 gallons of water to spray these crops. So basically, you're taking a very minor quantity of the pesticide and mixing it to make sure that it spreads uniformly on the plants that you are trying to spray. If it is weeds, that's what you want to cover, so you can kill them. And at the same time, if you are spraying for insect control or disease, you want to make sure that your crop plants are properly vetted through this chemical or the combination of chemical plus the spreader or the water, the solvent you use to make sure that it gives a good control on that product. Now, according to certain estimates, I can tell you the pesticide usage has reduced significantly across the crops. For example, cotton. Years ago, half of the world's pesticides produced went into the crop cotton itself. Now, the number of sprays that goes into from the cotton has reduced significantly. Okay, let's see what other questions are coming up. Keep the questions coming. It's nice. I'm doing it for the first time. It's interesting that I cannot cannot see you or cannot hear your questions, but I can at least see and respond to them here. Okay, I do not have any other questions waiting on the wing here. Let me run through one more. Oh, actually, I already answered this question. I typically get asked, does the use of GM crops results in increasing pesticide use? Well, so there is one argument I didn't make earlier was possibly, you can say if some of these GM crops are meant for weed control, that's herbicide tolerance traits, that means you're going to use more pesticides, or in this case, the weedicide or a herbicide, right? Yes, there is a truth to that argument, but think about what pesticide, what particular brand that you are using on a chemical. If I talk about the glyphosate, it is very safe chemical to the environment. It has been used in the agriculture or even around our homes for last 40 to 50 years. So you are replacing other more toxic or more less what should I say specific, I mean broadly active chemicals, what I meant. So if when you're replacing anything like that with a very safe chemical, it's always a gain. And it's a very minor increase, but nevertheless, there was an increase of the glyphosate, for example, but you are replacing a bad chemical with a good one. Okay, I see a question here. What makes a product organic? Ah, what a great question. Finally, something related to more like the target audience I'm speaking with, right? Now, organic does not mean pesticide free or chemicals free. There are list of chemicals that are approved for organic production. So, I mean, I have heard people talk about organic means natural and no insecticides, no pesticides on them, but it's not true. But I mean, think about the statement I made earlier. All of these pests, whether it's weeds or insects or the diseases, are there taking up the nutrients and the space that where these crops are growing, or possibly even taking a lot of juices that are produced in these crops that stop those plants from producing a profitable crop. Now they have to use some kind of intervention to produce a crop, and again, like I said, organic does not necessarily mean it's a pesticide free, or natural does not mean it's pesticide free. And then the other argument I also hear along this topic is, I mean, it's the pesticide is of a plant origin or green pesticide. What is that supposed to mean? So think about this way. Um, Castor plant that we use for I mean many people in Asia, possibly even in other countries, do use these castor beans to produce the castor oil. We use it on our hairs, right? So if you take the castor bean and if you look into it, after the even extracting the oil, there is this protein called ricin. That ricin is extremely toxic to humans and even other animals. But I mean, if you say, okay, I'm going to take this resin and then spray it on a crop, or even possibly use a tobacco and extract the pyrethrum or marigold, for example, you identify these chemicals and you extract them and spray them on the crop. Just because they are coming from the plant does not necessarily make them safe. Indeed, what many of these chemical companies have done, they have identified an alternative or made changes to those molecules that make them less problematic for a large majority of the organisms, but still are efficacious for the insects that you want to control. So my point is, organic does not necessarily mean it's pesticide free, or even plant origin or green chemicals does not necessarily mean it's always good for the environment. So read the labels, inform yourself, and then make the best judgment. In fact, I go to this site that's maintained by Oregon State University. It's called National Pesticide Information Center. It has a lot of information that can be very useful to address some of these kinds of questions. Okay, so see another question that comes up. Many consumers are especially nervous about glyphosate. There are some organizations that come out with list of products with pesticide residue and especially glyphosate. How is this being measured? Is it dangerous for us? Well, I mean, again, great question. So in fact, in last several days, there was a report that came out from the EPA. They looked at I don't remember the exact number of products, maybe around 4,000 to 5,000 products they assayed in the last year looking for the pesticide contamination. 99% of those the products did not have the chemical level that crossed the MRL. In fact, almost 45% of those products had chemicals that are undetectable levels. So, I mean, my point is, yes, I mean, you see people make some claims about the cereals having a glyphosate, or even, some other products having a glyphosate. But I mean, there might, just because it's present does not necessarily mean it's going to cause an harm. That's the number one. And two, even the detection methods and the kinds of assays they run, they might come across as if there may be some residues left over on these products. But bottom line, with the EPA reference, what I was trying to say is, as long as if the MRL or the residue level is lower than the MRL, it should be safe for consumption. Okay, I see another question here. Can you talk a little bit more on your role at Bayer? Oh, okay. So as I said, in the last 3 years, I have been working in our regulatory science organization. Here, my job is to work with our scientist colleagues to generate the data package that demonstrate the utility and the safety of these products, following the guidelines put forward by global agencies. It could be like OECD guidance document that provides a guidance as to how we develop these products, or it could also be looking at EFSA guidance document, for example, European Food Safety Authority guidance to demonstrate the safety of our products. So these are the data package we produce and then put them together, submit it to the governments around the world. And if there are questions from these agencies, then, for example, like Korea, RDA, right, or FDA, so we answer their questions, and only when they are satisfied with the data package we provided to them, and explanation offered subsequently if there are questions, that these agencies approve our products. And I already mentioned that it takes anywhere between 12 to 15 years to get the product out of the door in our product, in our company, or even other companies too. But within the regulatory alone, it could be anywhere between 5 to 6 years worth of studies, the submissions, Q&As. It may not be in one country, but across all of these key countries where the products are cultivated, are imported and processed. That's how long it takes to get the product out of the door. Okay, so I'm at time now. I don't know if there are more questions. I can keep going. I still have one question that was on my list. I don't know what should I do here. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, I don't see any more questions coming up. But I mean, so I forgot to mention upfront. Again, I don't do a lot of interaction on the Facebook, but I do post some information, especially on the LinkedIn site. If you find any useful, anything useful, I'll be posting there. You can follow me there using the same name, Anil Kumar Gowda. So again, I and my colleague Kelly can forward you a couple of information sites where there is a reliable information for people to go and look at and inform themselves as to when they are having conversation on these topics, as how best to answer these kinds of questions. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here and share my personal story here, and then also answer some of the questions that I typically get asked on this topic. Oh, sorry, I missed one of the question earlier here. It says any resources to add. Yeah, perhaps, some of the places I go to get my answers are the GMO answers. Com would be a good one. Pesticide facts, or even the growing matters. And then I already mentioned about this National Pesticide Information Center have a lot of useful information for you all. Again, like I said, I can stick around and answer questions if people are popping them in. I can stay on. Repeat the topic. I wasn't doing a presentation, Noor, if you are asking about the what topic we're talking about. But I mean, I'm a scientist at Bayer Crop Science, and I was trying to answer some of the questions related to GM crops and possibly even insects and pesticides in general as well. And I also spoke a little bit about the sustainability of GM crops. Okay, and looks like there are no other questions coming up. So again, thank you all for joining today. And then if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on by email. And you can reach me at Anil Kumar Gowda and anilkumar.gowda at bayer.com. Okay, thank you all. Have a nice day.